Why the disturbing recent school shootings? There are no doubt a multitude of tangled root causes, but towards the top of the list, there must be an acknowledgement of a few central failures. We have, for one, collectively turned our backs on God, and many have worked tirelessly to remove signs of faith from our daily lives. We've deadened the value of life with a culture of death. We've attacked empathy with invasive and cruel technology. And I would argue we've refused to take any serious degree of responsibility for our family's personal safety. Even law enforcement dropped the ball in the most recent case when they failed to appropriately follow up on credible tips regarding the shooter. In my opinion, we're witnessing a perfect storm of a variety of societal factors: loss of the sacredness of life, the culture of death, loss of spiritual dimension to our lives, loss of empathy attributed to both technology as well as the media's glorification of violence, fatherlessness, and even a faltering capacity for language. Have you perhaps noticed that people can't debate today like they used to? For proof, just look at the comments section of a newspaper article online. Inability to effectively articulate feelings may heighten elements of aggression. Look at the 1950s and ask yourself whether or not it was easier or more difficult to get one's hands on a gun, especially as a young person. In general, I think most of us would agree that it was easier, and this is particularly true of rural America. If liberal logic were accurate or consistent then, we'd expect to see a decrease in gun violence as access has been more and more restricted by law upon law. Yet that's clearly not the case. Here's what a relative and certified NRA instructor named Phil Erickson remembers about guns in the 50s and 60s. Quote, "I remember well the 50s. We had a lot of bullying in and after school, but none of this violence. And yes, I remember how easy it was for kids to access guns through the 60s. Dad had shotguns and .22 rifle propped up in a corner of the basement with ammo in the hall closet. I had a .22 rifle and ammo in my room, but honestly, it never even occurred to me to ever shoot another person or even point a gun at anyone." End quote. The news media also bears a great deal of blame here. Years ago, I wrote a newspaper editor to suggest that they stop printing the names of school shooters. He replied that while he understood my concerns, there was too great a public desire and right to know the details. Well, it's those precise details that are partly responsible for the proliferation of copycat school shootings. The Roseburg, Oregon shooter reportedly said as much in his sick online ramblings. The Douglas County Sheriff certainly understood this when he refused to identify the Roseburg shooter. There is not a shred of doubt that there is a copycat element here. Why isn't the press behaving responsibly by refusing to repeatedly name or picture these shooters? Their names should be forgotten and their victims should be remembered. Of course, this is not the same thing as saying that we shouldn't very closely examine the lives and backstory of the shooters in an attempt to better understand this unfolding tragedy, but let them be anonymous in their identification. A retired educator of incarcerated youngsters named Susan Kaltwasser commented the following, quote, "They seemed to have no ability to foresee their future and had fantasies about either doing something big or doing something bad that would get them into the newspapers, wanting to find some sense of self-worth and violence that would get them noticed was prominent. Those who had committed murder did not seem to understand death. Suicide is often the expected outcome, or to be shot by the police." End quote. Another dimension of my thinking on this topic is the fact that I am a fellow who can say I've saved lives by both the use of a weapon as well as the use of emergency medical knowledge, namely CPR. That reminds me that one of the most important things in this debate is to avoid becoming either kind of bystander, for either one who fails to participate in the debate in a constructive way or the one who was shot. 6 short-term common-sense suggestions follow for readers' consideration. First, increase plainclothes police in schools. They should be patrolling schools on a random yet thorough basis. Second, engage more with those on the margins of society, the outsiders. Teach young children to be kind and to treat others with respect, love, and empathy. This also includes greatly increasing access to mental health. I suggest restricting weapon ownership also for select mentally ill people. it will also be helpful. Third, take your family to church and limit the influence of the internet and technology within your family. Fourth, as The Atlantic recently pointed out in an article entitled "Another School Shooting, but Who's Counting?", there is significant hyperbole taking place with regards to the statistics surrounding school shootings, and we all need to be conscious of the power of bad statistics to heighten anger and panic. Don't repeat outlandish statistics and demand more accountability from the media regarding the publication of the shooter's personal information. After all, calling these shooters lone wolves only serves to insult a noble creature of nature. They are dysfunctional cowards. Fifth, legislative action is encouraged to raise the minimum age to purchase an AR-15 to 21 years of age. Sixth, consider taking greater responsibility for your own safety and security by learning to safely and legally use a firearm in self-defense.